Okay, Yom Sheni. First of all, today's Monday, and it's Erev Tisha B'Av. Ches Menachem. Ches Menachem on Erev Tisha B'Av. So everybody knows, I'm sure, that it says in Sfarim. First of all, it says in Halacha that Tisha B'Av is called a Moyed. Tisha B'Av, you don't say Tachnun. And Tisha B'Av, you don't say Tachnun because it's a din of a Yom Tov. It's a din of a Moyed. Kora Alai Moyed. It's a pasuk. What kind of Yom Tov is Tisha B'Av? It's a Yom Tov Hashem Ha'asit. It's a Yom Tov based on the future. But I guess when something is, usually you can't celebrate something that hasn't happened yet. You know, someone who's going to win the lottery tomorrow doesn't know. And even if he believes, but until the money's in your pocket, I always tell people there's only two types of money. There's not my money and your money. It's not true. There's money which is in my pocket and money which is not in my pocket. That's it. If your money is in my pocket, it's mine. If my money is in your pocket, it's yours. I know that that's true, but psychologically that's very true. But let's not talk about money. It's a very uncomfortable subject. But something which hasn't happened, Tisha B'Av is such an acute event that it's a moyed based on the Yossi. And of course the Rebbe points out that Minche, Yom Kippur, Tisha B'Av we say Nachem. Besides for saying Anenu, which we say on every fast day, we also say Nachem. And Nachem is from the word Nechama, to console. And the Rebbe says that the reason you say Nachem, Tisha B'Av, and Mincha in the afternoon is because that's the Leda of Mashiach. Mashiach is born Tisha B'Av in the afternoon. There's an inyan of Mashiach on Tisha B'Av. So spiritually, every year on Tisha B'Av, there is a Leda of Mashiach. There's a birth of Mashiach. And Vestach mentioned Rechanen, that the year the Rebbe was born was a Nibiyar. If it's a Nibiyar from Tisha B'Av, Yiralf Nissen is exactly 9 months. Vestach? People, as you think about it, it works out. The Rebbe was born to Afresh Samach Beis. It was a Nibbi, it was a leader, 2 others. If you had an extra other, so it works out that Yud Aleph Nissen is exactly 9 months after Tisha B'Av. So this is another reason for us to be excited about the Rebbe. But we want B'Poyel and not B'Koyach. So the Rebbe discusses this idea that Tisha B'Av is latest Mashiach. Tafshin Nun Aleph, the Rebbe spoke about this. You know, Tafshin Nun Aleph, the Rebbe came in before Ma'ariv and spoke a Sikha. After Ma'ariv, the Rebbe started to sing that his father's Akofas Nigna on Tisha B'Av, which is very, very transforming. It's a whole nother Tisha B'Av. It's a Tisha B'Av with a perspective that's looking forward as opposed to a Tisha B'Av which is looking back. So the Rikir Kala Ikrimi is a Mashiach Zol Kumum B'Peil Mamish. You know, the Rebbe spoke a Sikha once. Pedei lekimes Yisrael mikol tzareisav, v'hu yiftei Yisrael mikol avineisav. And that means as follows. Yeah, I have a siddur here. There's 2 things that come together. And these 2 things that come together, people don't even realize that they're 2 things. One is called vidui, and the other is called tachnun. One is called vidui, one is called tachnun. Vidui is Hashamnu Bagadnu Gezalnu Dibanu, confession. Tachnun means to plead, tchina, to plead with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And when you do tachnun, not when you do vidui. Now, I don't know what women do in the Bible show, but in the men's show, you put your head down, you do Nefilas Apayim. And according to Chassidus, according to Kabbalah, Nefilas Apayim is Mesiras Nefesh. It's giving your life. Nefilas Apayim is higher than Shmones. And Nefilas Apayim you do when you say tachnun. And there's different minhagim what you say. The Misnagdim say Vayem Udav Del God, the Racham V'chanan. We say what the Misnagdim say, what the Ashkenazim say in Slichas. But our Tachnun is Ledovid. Right? So you have 2 things. You have Vidui, which is the top of the page. Hashamnu, Bagadnu, we sinned. I'm sorry for being cynical. I take it back. I'm not cynical. It's easy to say. But then we have Hashem, Kil Racham V'chanan. That's not Vidui. That's Tachnun. That's pleading. When you say Tachnun, you fall on your face and you say Ledavid. Ledavid is capital, I think it's Chavhei and Tilim. It's a psalm. It's a whole capital Tilim that we read whenever we do Tachnun and what's called the Filas Apayim. Yes, it is capital Chavhei and Tilim. But we add a pasuk that doesn't say in capital Chavhei and Tilim, from someplace else. I think it's from Psalm 130, from Shir Hamalas Mi Mamakim. I knew a man who was a PhD, 3 or 4 different PhDs. That's how smart he was. And one of his PhDs, or 2 of his PhDs, were in literature. When he was in school, you're talking about a very high madrege in literature. They used to say when he went to school, it's worth to learn ancient Hebrew just to say Psalm 130 in the original. In other words, this is the epitome of Chochmas Chitzenius. Klipa, 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 klipa. That means seichel with no God, no God, no God, no God, no God. But the kop, but their head. It's worth to learn Lashon Kodesh to be able to say Shir Hamalis Mimamakim, which we say in Daseres Mitzvah, half asleep, in the original Hebrew, which we say Daseres Mitzvah, Shir Hamalis Mimamakim. Goyim, Goyishkeit, the essence of Goyishkeit says this translation won't do. You gotta learn Lashon Kodesh just to say these 8 psukim. Mimamakim Kasicha Hashem. I heard this from a Yid who's totally steeped in that world. Anyway, but when we do Tachnun every day, we add this pasuk from the end of Psalm 130. So the David Elach is Psalm 25, Kapitel Chavhei in Tehillim, and we add one pasuk. So if you look in your Siddur, you'll see that every pasuk has an Aleph, Beis, Gimel. It's more or less an alphabet. There's 1 or 2 letters missing. The last pasuk is Chav Beis, and then the next one doesn't have a number. Did you ever notice that? I did. Why? Because it's in someplace else. You understand? This is a Kapitel Tehillim, and we add one pasuk from someplace else. I don't know who put that extra pasuk there, but the Rebbe said, "Don't you hear what's going on? There's a shaila, yeah. When's Mashiach coming? When's Mashiach coming?" And the Torah says, "When you'll be ready." So the Rebbe says, "P'dei Elokim es Yisrael mikol tzereisav." The Eibusha should redeem Yin for all the Torahs, which means Mashiach should come. V'hu. Then we add from someplace else. V'hu yiftes Yisrael mikol aveinesav. After Mashiach comes, he'll fix up all of our averis. In other words, the Tanya is that Mashiach can't come until Yidden do tshuva. So when we say Tachnun every single day, we say, redeem us, and Mashiach will come, we'll do tshuva afterwards. This is the old story. You know, Avram Fried has a song which I happen to love because of the Teichen. And it's based on a Medrash, and it's also based on one of the Talmidei Baal Shem Tov from the Balaflor, the Balaflor. That there's a Medrash that says that there is a debate between Yidden and the Eibishter. What is the debate? The debate is Shuva Elai Shuva Aleichem. The Eibishter says, "Return to me, and I will return to you." And we say to the Eibishter, "Hashiveinu Hashem Elecha v'nashuva." You understand? The Eibishter says to us, "You come to me," and it's the same. Every marriage, all our problems will be solved. Just listen to me. Another person says, "All our problems will be solved. Just listen to me." And that's the standoff right there. What's the problem? Why are you so stubborn? So the Eibishter says, "Shuva Elai v'shuva Aleichem." The Yidden should do tshuva, and then the Eibishter will come to us. And we say, "Hashiveinu Hashem Elecha v'nashuva." That the Eibishter should come to us. So then the way this is a medrash. It's a medrash. I looked up the medrash actually. In the record where he has this song, he has the source. So part of it's a medrash, and part of it is from the Balaflor. The Balaflor wrote a sefer on Chumash called Ponim Yofes. It's brought to Chassidus. Ponim Yofes, and someplace in the Ponim Yofes, I think, I'm almost sure he has this word. So how do you paskin this? How do you resolve this impasse? It's a very simple solution. Look in the Torah. The Eibusha gave us the Torah, yeah. So what does it say in the Torah when there's an argument? So the whole niggin is Yochid v'Rabbi v'Lochid Rabbi. The Eibishter is one. And that's what's great about the Eibishter, that he's one, yeah? And we're many. And that's what's great about the Yidden, that they're many. What's the halacha? When one argues with many, the many are winning. And the din is beferish. That if there's many who say kach, and one who says kach, and everybody knows that the one is greater than the many. Everybody knows that the one is on a high. Faket, the reason he's disagreeing is because Layodel will say daita. He's so smart, nobody understands what he understands. But the halacha is dafka like the rabbim. Achad rabbim mahatis. That's Rabbi Fried has a niggin on this. Yochid v'rabbim halacha k'rabbim. And this is what we say every day. The Rebbe spoke about this very emotionally. That you can wait for Yidden to do tshuva. Paltiel, kibbutz, and throw, and call for reis. Okay, they've come, but they've done plenty tshuva. Like the Rebbe brought 101 times in the Siches that in our generation, after the Holocaust, the idea of Shemeh, Hira, Tshuva, Belieba is like, there's not a Yid in our time, says the Rebbe, that didn't have a Hira, Tshuva. And the halacha is, Makadesh Isha, Hariat Makadesh Li. Right, you know this. Amanas Shani, Tzadik Gomer. And everybody knows he's a Rasha Gomer. Harezim Mekudeshes, Favot, Shem, Hir, Tshuva, Belibe. Tshuva Kemetan and Arega, Beshaita Chado, Berigachad. Tshuva is one of those mitzvahs that doesn't have Zman. Right? Every mitzvah has a shear. There's a shear. How big a piece of matzah, how quickly you have to eat it. If you want to sit in the sukkah and make a bracha, leisha b'sukkah, how long do you have to stay in the sukkah to be able to make a bracha? What are you going to do in the sukkah? Every mitzvah has a shear. Tshuva has no shear. It takes time, but there's no minimum time, you understand? The Rebbe, the Meister of the Rebbe, the Rebbe told over the story. The Frierdiker was in Germany, someplace. And the leaders of the Kehillah were on the train seeing the Rebbe off. And the Deutsche and the Germans are so precise. So one of them looked at his watch. And the Rebbe told the story by Fabrengen. That's how I know the story. It's printed in the Sichos. Nach geblieben eine Minute, he says, in Yiddish, German. There's 1 minute till the train leaves. So the Frierdiker Rebbe retorts, Kemen arayin chappen ton tshuva. Because tshuva takes no time. Kemen arayin chappen ton tshuva. Tshuva takes no time. There's no shear for tshuva. And of course, there's a deeper element to this, of course, that besides the fact that tshuva takes no time, tshuva defies time. Why? Because tshuva corrects the past. The whole union of tshuva is that I'm not a sinner. I never sinned. I never sinned. Avedas are erased retroactively. I told you the story, Kam upon it. L'kavod Erev Tisha B'Av. I want to teach you Tanya, but L'kavod Erev Tisha B'Av. I'll just tell you this ma'aseh, that ich habe es gehört from Rabbi Fuchs, who knew this person personally. So gewen a Yidin Poil geheißen Berel Kurnitzer. Harav Berel Kurnitzer. Berel, his last name was Garfinkel. Berel Kurnitzer was a Tomim. He went to Lubavitch. He was a Tomim. I explain the word Tomim. It's like explain the word Malach. It's a word, hakelvay. You say Tomim, it's enough. You don't have to say anything you're going to say afterwards is going to diminish. He was a big Yirei Shamayim and a big Chassid and a big, very bottle to the Rebbe, alle Sachen, but he was also a Moedendik Alamdi. And his thing was that everything has to be recorded to memory. He wanted the Baruch to know everything by heart. Because he knew everything by heart. And he just knew the whole Shas. He just knew it by heart. And it was fresh and it was on the tip of his tongue. Rabbi Fuchs, I was Rabbi Fuchs's class. Rabbi Fuchs used to put his finger on a page in the Gemara, we learned Baba Basa, and turn 75 pages later and tell you what word was underneath. You imagine I had such a malamet? I was 10. Masechta Baba Basa, the biggest Masechta. He put his finger like this. He would look at the page and tell you what word is on this finger, and he was right. Thus it says like a letter from Battle Quran. Said, I had such a malamed. And you know what my Talmidim have? I don't want to tell you what my Talmidim have. But I can't do that trick. That trick I can't do. There's a couple other things I can't. Stell sich vor, ich hatte das am malamed. Was hat am malamed hat gehad? Anyway, Battle Quran never got married. Because he had tuberculosis on his lungs. And he was a time bomb. That's how they looked at it. That one day he's going to come back and fight. He suffered a lot because of it. And he lived in Poland, and in Poland it was a very poor country, and the medicines was very difficult to get. And the Frierdiker Rebbe's oldest daughter, the Rashag's Rebbetzin, her name was Chana, took care of him. She doted on him. She had this in her. She was very maternal. Took care of people. She took care of the Frierdiker Rebbe also. And she would go into him, and she would ask him how he was doing, and she would also bring in medicines and foods that he needed for his illness. Amongst the things that he needed for tuberculosis, I mean, I know about tuberculosis, and you know about Pluto, was oranges, citrus fruits, and cream, which were both cream from milk, both of which were difficult to get in Poland, and she used to bring it to him. So she comes into him one day to bring him what he needed for his health. So he says to her, I had a dream and I saw the Rebbe meaning her father, not the Rebbe Rashab, her father, the Frierdiker Rebbe. And in the dream, the Tata gesagt am Maimer Chsidis, Refoenu ad Hashem ve'erof, which is a pasuk in Yeshaya. And he tells her, Ich hab the Maimer. I remember it. I remember the Maimer. Now, just to give you an erich, the Tzemach Tzedek had an uncle whose name was from the Vetter Yossi in Lubavitch. And he given a few generations before Berel Kurnet said, yeah? He was the Tzemach Tzedek's uncle because of a second marriage. He was a big Gaon, a big chassid. And here the Tzemach Tzedek used to learn together b'chavrusa. And the Tzemach Tzedek said that he should be Rebbe, that the Vetter Yossi was ein Rebbe, he was older than him. And the Vetter Yossi getained that the Tzemach Tzedek was ein Rebbe. Anyway, here again they learned together in Union. It was after the Mitzvah Rebbe passed away, and they had a kasha without a teretz. And at night they both dreamt that the Alter Rebbe walked into the Chavrusa as they were learning and answered the question. So the Vetter Yossi gets up in the morning. Ik ben a tzaddik ayid, be'emes a tzaddik, nit b'shem amush. And he walks into the Tzemach Tzedek, and on the table is sitting already ungeschrieben, written the Hanocha of the teretz that Alter Rebbe had given them during the night. But the Vetter Yossi remembered the dream, but he didn't remember the teretz. He didn't remember what Alter Rebbe said. And he walks into the Tzemach Tzedek, and the answer is already written up. And of course, once he saw it, it came back to him. So the Vetter Yossi says to the Tzemach Tzedek, "Nu, wer darf sein Rebbe?" You understand? The uncle says to the nephew, "You tell me." Now you fast forward 4 generations later. A Tomim heard a maimed in a cholim und hat him. So you understand what's made? Tomim, nicht poshet in ganz. So she comes home and she tells her father the story. And again, I heard this from my folks who knew he was Dibishas Maise. I went into Belo Kornitze, who was not well. He was called the Boichen in the yeshiva. He had a very important position in Temcha Pimim and Otfors. Belo Kornitze at the gates, Mishpacha Mekven Garfinkel. And he told me that he had a dream and he saw the Rebbe, that means you, and that the Rebbe said a maime, a finish of Eirafi, and that had the maime. So the Friedrich Rebbe asks her, had the maime? He remembers what I said? She says, had the maime. Soll gehen noch einmal zum doctor. The Friedrich says he should go back again to the doctor. So he goes back to the doctor, they do an x-ray, there's no tuberculosis. Fini, gone. But wait, that's not the end of the story. The doctors were so taken aback, they took out the old x-rays. And they were gone from the old x-rays. He was never sick. He was sick. He was this is the Rebbe Tamal gesagt, der Verbringen, der Shita Rogatshova, many times. The Rogatshova said there's different types of medicine. Usually medicine heals you that you're not sick anymore. But the Rogatshova writes as a medicine, the Lei Shchiach, it's not so widely known, that it heals you in such a way that you were never sick. Which is in your tshuva, right? There's tshuva tator and tshuva law, and it's connected to nedarim, hafadas nedarim and atadas nedarim, as we always know from Chassidus. Tshuva works that you never did the Aveda. That's the Chayach HaTshuva. It's part, when we say tshuva doesn't take any time. So first of all, it takes no time to do tshuva. And the tshuva defies the phenomena of time that what happened yesterday didn't happen. So the Rebbe says, Pedeil Akimitz Yisrael Mikol Tzaresa. First of all, the Gula should come, Mashiach should come. Hashiveinu Havaya Elecha V'Nashuva. And then nach, we add from Psalm 130, from Kapitel Kuf Lamed and Tilim, V'hu Yiftes Yisrael Mikol Avenes. Okay, so the Rebbe should help us learn B'Peil Mamish. The Vav Mashiach and B'Peil Mamish. That's what I told the reality. Okay, genug. Lama lana bisel Tanya. We're on page Vav. And we are, I think, 3 lines from the bottom of the page. Va'af. Am I right? 3 lines from the bottom of the page where it says Va'af. Richtig? Yes? I need someone to tell me that I'm right, because I don't have a regular time. Yeah? 3 lines from the bottom of the page. Peirik base. Page Vav. Page Vav. Va'af. Now, Rabbi say, I managed to give you 6 classes on the last 12 lines. I'm a genius in time consumption. Or time disposal. What took us so long? What took us so long is because I really wanted to give you the richness of what's happening here at the beginning of Peirik Beis about Chelik Elokam Imal Mamish, that the Neshama is a Chelik Elokam Imal Mamish. And the first thing is that we have 2 different proofs for Chelik Elokam Imal Mamish. One is before the 2 dots, and one is after the 2 dots. And also the idea that we learned last week on Monday, that the Alter Rebbe is bending over backwards and twisting himself inside out, that the Rambam and Chassidus are the same. If you were here last Monday, this was the class that I gave you last Monday, that the Rambam Chassidus said, but we're done with that. What did we learn so far? We learned so far that a neshama is a shtik eibishter. A neshama is a chelik elekam imal mamish. A neshama is a piece of the eibishter from above. Mamish. That's point number one. And that in terms of Kabbalah, in terms of Hishtalshalos, what brings this chelik elekam imal mamish forward is chokhmah. Those are the 2 points. Point A. The neshama is a chelik elekam imal. The neshama is a piece of the eibishter from above. Mamish, and that it comes through Hishtalshalos, through Chok. So, we have to continue reading. But before we continue reading, I'll give you a speech. Hopefully not too many speeches. And I'm going to start by making a statement, and then I'm going to explain the statement to the best of my limited abilities. And we'll see, we're not going to get to this today, next time we'll get to it, but this is the Hagdama to what follows. The statement is, Neshamas come from Kalim, period. Neshamas come from Kalim, Neshamas don't come from oil. What does that mean? This is the question on the table, yeah? And I'll put it to you in these words. Neir Hashem Nishmas Adam, correct? Neir Hashem Nishmas Adam. You've seen those words before? Neir Havaya Nishmas Adam. When you buy yard-side candles, they charge you an extra 15 cents to have those words on the outside. Neir Havaya Nishmas Adam. Neir Havaya Nishmas Adam means that the mashal for a neshama is a candle. And here you have a split in Chassidus. It's one of those examples where you see how Tanya, which is the Teidah Shebeksav, of all of Chassidus is different than the Chassidus which is based on the Tanya. In Tanya, when they bring the mashal of Neir Havaya Nishmas Adam, what is the comparison between a neshama and a candle? The fire, the flame, the eish. All over Chassidus. When they bring the mashal of Neir Havaya Nishmas Adam, what is the neshama? The cup, the fuel, and the wick. Not the fire. The fire is the eish. And this contradiction is addressed in Chassidus, and it's very uncomfortable. The Rabbi Matan sagt, wie versteht, was meint Rabbi Matan sagt. But there's my mother Chassidus that asked this question. How come in Tanya it says, Neir Hashem Nishmas Adam, that the neshama is the fire? And how come all over Chassidus it says, Neir Havaya Nishmas Adam, that the neshama is the cup and the candle? And there's answers to this question. There's many answers to this question. One of the simple answers to this question is, depends what kind of neshama. Rubam Kekulam, the vast majority of neshamas are the keli, are the cup, not the fire. And there are rare neshamas like Abshim Bayachai that are the fire. As I said, but in most places in Chassidus, when they address the question, is the neshama the cup, the keli, or is the neshama the oil, the answer is, the neshama on the outside is the keli. If you'll dig deep enough, if you'll challenge it enough, inside that kli, you'll find oil. So this is how, in other words, another way that this question is resolved. Now, we, in this class this morning, are going to follow the path, not of the Tanya. We're not going to follow the path that Neir Havaya Nishmas Adam, that the neshama is the fire. Faket. We're going to follow the path of Neir Havaya Nishmas Adam, that the neshama is the keli. And I'll tell you why. What's the difference between keli and oir? The difference between keli and oir, and I'm using fancy words, and if you don't know what they mean, don't worry, neither do I. So we're all the same, you understand? The oir is called dveikus nikeres. The dveikus, nikeres, from the word nikar. The light is a dveikus, that means it's reflecting the Eibishter, and you see that's reflecting the Eibishter. The keli is called dveikus, built in together. The keli is also in Atzilus. It's also reflecting the Eibishter, but you don't see it. When you look at a keli, you don't see how that keli is representing the Eibishter. You see how that keli is representing itself. And obviously, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to understand that Dveikus Nikeres is better than Dveikus built in together. For something to represent the Eibishter, that the minute you look at it, you don't see itself, you see the source, is better than something that you look at it and you see itself, you don't see its source. Right? Thanks for nodding. Yeah? But there's another way to look at it. Another way to look at it. If something is in a dvekas nikeres, it has no mitzias. If your identity is that whatever people look at, don't see you, they see the Eibishter, you have no identity. If you have no identity, you cannot serve the Eibishter. You can simply represent him. And the Eibishter didn't create us to represent him. The Eibishter created us, I'll use a radical word, to duplicate him, to copy him, to be another him. And therefore, Dveikus Nikeres is a chasaron. If a Yid reflects the Eibishter in such an obvious way that when you look at the Yid, you see the Eibishter, then the Yid is not a Metzias B'Shnei Yatzmei, is not an entity unto himself, doesn't have free will, can't serve the Eibishter, and he's not fulfilling the Eibishter's purpose. So actually, it turns out that it's in the best interest of the neshama to be compared to and to come from Keli, rather than to be compared to and come from Oyer. Even though some places it says like this, in some places it says like this. Because if a neshama is compared to Oyer, the neshama is reflection of the Eibishter, which is wonderful. But a nitke metzias farzich, the Eibishter wants us to exist and to have free will and to even have good choices and bad choices. We call that a yetzer teva and a yetzer hara, and a nefesh elokis and a nefesh habamis. And we should serve the Eibishter from our own perspective, from our own initiative, with our own avoida, etc., etc., etc. And for this we have to be separate. And separate is kelim. The shamas come dafke from keli and not from eir. The shamas are godliness. In fact, as we just learned, they're chelik elokami ma'al mamish. You can't get higher, but they manifest not in a way that reflects elokah. They manifest in a way that the elokah is hidden, and what's revealed is a metzias, dveikus built in ikeres. And there's mishalim for this, simple mishalim, classic mishalim, known mishalim, which are brought in so many Mamari Chasidis. When they want to talk about a neshama, they give this mashal, that Torah has two mishalim, and a neshama also has two mishalim. What are the two mishalim for Torah? The two mishalim for Torah are light and wisdom. Oyer and Seich. Torah is called the Oyer of the Eibishter, Torah Oyer, and Torah is called the Chochmah of the Eibishter. What do we know about light? We know about light that it has no metzias other than that it reflects its source. Light reflects its source. Light reflects its source in such a way that the light has no self-identity other than what we call in Chassidus Dveikus, representing the source. And even Chochmah, even ideas, even wisdom, that have more of a form. The whole union of Chachma, that it's a reflection of the Chacham. Wisdom reflects the wise person, in this case the wise truth, that radiated that wisdom. What are neshamas compared to? Neshamas are compared to children and to chosen ones. What do we know about children? It's a very sensitive subject. Children are a very sensitive subject. I was across the street before learning Yagdut Tere. So a young man tells me that he was giving a shir to some girls, a Tisha B'Av Sich, and they were talking about the idea how the Eibishter keeps all the mitzvahs, and the Rebbe asked the kasha, the Eibishter keep all the mitzvahs, how was he able to break the mitzvah? The Beis HaMikdash, it's a Issa De'eraisa, Leisason Kein L'Shem Elokeichem, that you're not allowed to make a Chilul Hashem, you're not allowed to touch. You touch an Evan of the Mizbeach, you're like, the Eibishter destroyed the whole house. And the teres that the Rebbe gives in the Sikha is that it was Sheisam Nas Livnis, he was breaking it to build it. So I said to him right away, the halacha in the Beis Knesset is, and this is a perfect example of it, that you have an old shul. And when you want to break it down to build a new one, you're not allowed to break down the old until the new one is already standing. For Haraya, the Eibishter broke down the old shul. We waited quite a while for the new building, you understand? Okay, so he told me the girls didn't think of that kasha. So one of the girls asked him, if the Eibishter keeps all the mitzvahs, how was the Eibishter Makayim Kibbud Avayim? How was the Eibishter Makayim Kibbud Avayim? So we had a conversation. Whatever I told him, it's not important. But there's a Gemara that Rabbi Yechanan said. Rabbi Yechanan was an orphan. He didn't know his father and didn't know his mother. And he said, I'm very happy I didn't know my parents because there's no way you could be Makayim this mitzvah the way you're supposed to. Rabbi Yechanan said, there's no way you could keep it avayim. Yeah. Keep it avayim is a poshut mitzvah. And it's a very difficult mitzvah. Why? Because children's relationship to parents, how do we say it in our culture? It's complicated. And that's a nice word. It's complicated. In other words, when you're a child from a parent, everything you have from your parents, including that you're an entity unto yourself. The deepest thing that parents give children is that a child doesn't belong to his father, a child doesn't belong to his mother, a child belongs to himself from the minute he's born. That's the halach. The minute before he's born, he's a piece of his mother, and there's nafkaminas la and so on. When a woman is carrying a child, that child is considered a piece of the mother, and there's nafkaminas la dinner. The moment that child is yetel aved elam, that child, to use modern American language, has the same right to exist as the adult does, because the child doesn't belong to his mother. The child has been given as an achrayus to the mother and to the father, but the child belongs to himself. So the definition of a child is that he's separate from his parent. And noch tiefer, where did he get the separateness from his parents? From his parents. Who gave him the ability to be an entity unto himself? His source. Neshamas are compared to children with the Eibishter's kinder, which means, as I said before, the relationship gets complicated. Complicated mitzvah. The Eibishter is our father, like we learned in the last couple of weeks. Why is the relationship complicated? Because the Eibishter gives us everything about him, including that he is dependent on nothing. The Eibishter gives us everything the Eibishter Kavayachal has, including that he has no dependency, so we exist as free beings. This is the matana that the Eibishter gave us. And the second idea is Ata v'Chaton. The Eibishter chose us. And the whole Shtur of Mechsidus is you can only choose something that's equal to the alternative. You get choosing an neshama. So the Rebbe Rashab look at the neshama. Vemen soll kleiben, Ivanke. It's a lot of the Rebbe Rashab at the neshama. Who should he choose? Ivanke, Abreda hat. Who should he choose? A Yid sitting a Beis HaMedrash or Ivan? Ivanke. When you talk about the neshama, there's no choices. When you talk about the goof, a Yiddish goof and a Goyish goof are exactly the same. And the Ata v'Chatana is in the goof. So Chassidus says, if the idea that we are the Eibishter's children means that we're separate from the Eibishter, the idea that the Eibishter chose us and that the choice is dafke in the goof, which is by itself daimim. It doesn't say about the gracious that the goof is ha'adam or lower than the goof is of a behemoth. You know this, right? How the Eibishter create animals? The dibur. Teiti ha'aretz nefesh chaya lamina behema v'remes v'chayse yaretz. So what happened? The Eibishter said those words. Living animals were crawling on the earth, walking on the earth. How the Eibishter make a person? Go miro einecha. He took a goylem. A goylem means a piece of clay, and he gave it a shape. And vayipach ba'ap of nishmas chaim, he blew into his nostrils a breath of life. That says in Torah, the goof of a yid is lower than the goof of an animal. From a Kabbalistic perspective, the goof of an animal comes from tzemeach, and the nefesh of the animal comes from chai. The goof of a person comes from daimim, and the nefesh of the person comes from a david. There's a great disparity in the goof and the neshama. So the Chassidus brings out that if it's true of the neshama of a yid, to use the quotation with which I started, that we come from Kelig, not from Oyer. That means the Eibishter made us to be children of a parent. I have everything from my father, including my ability not to listen to him. I'm not picking on my father, chas v'shalom. I mean it colloquially. I have great respect for my father. Betanemes, be'emes. Yeah. So when you talk about the goof, it's alachas kama v'kama. It's kol shkei v'kama v'chem. So a neshama is a chelik l'kam mimal mamish. But it is a complicated chelik l'kam mimal mamish. Because it's a chelik l'kam mimal mamish. It carries a l'kam mimal mamish. But in a condition, in a framework, where it's a metzias b'fnei atzma. Because the Eibishter wants out of a neshama two opposite things. That it should be an expression of him, and it should be an expression of itself. Like I discussed with you in Perek Aleph, I think I gave you this lecture in Perek Aleph, that a neshama is called a lakus shenase nivra. Neshama is the only being which has this label, a lakus shenase nivra. Some things are godliness, and some things are not godliness. The neshama is a little bit of both. On the outside, the neshama looks exactly like a malach. A malach has a nivra, and on the inside it's a lakus. because we come from Keli. We're like children. We're exactly like our parents. We are our parents. At the deepest level, a child is his parent. But this idea that we are our parent is in such a way that even though you are your parent, you belong to you and not to him. Because the deepest thing that the parent has is that he owns himself, and he gave that to you also. The deepest thing that the Eibishter has is there is a Yeshar Miti, that he belongs to himself. I mean, when it comes to the Eibishter, it's a silly thing to say. And he gave that to us, and he gave us the free will to choose to serve him, and to become Shutzim LaKadosh Baruch Hu b'Maaseh Bereishis, and so on and so on. So that's what an neshama is. It's like a chelik al kamimah mamish. But it comes through the kelim system, not through the oil system. And again, in Tanya, it may be different. But in the Maimonides Hasidus, that's how it's always explained. Because the neshama comes through the keli system, and not through the oil system, it's a chelik al kamimah mamish. Emphasis not just on chelik and alakah, on mimal, but on mamish. It's an entity unto itself. Every neshama comes into this world as a being that chooses to serve HaKadosh. Okay, questions or comments? I'm sorry? No, what does that mean? Has to show. The shamas are higher than angels.
The source doesn't come through the malachim?
The shamas come from malachim?
I thought they came through.
There's malachim that are overseeing the ladies and the shamas. The Gemara calls them malach hamamun al ha'eroyin. There's a malach who oversees pregnancy, conception and gestation and birth. But he's a shamish. What do we call it in my house today? What do we call it today? A doula. The malachim are doulas. Doula. We have a doula dance in our house. Sterling Street. So wissen wie mich ich bin. Malachim are doulas. Who needs a doula? The baby is born and you ship the doula home. A malach helps the neshama, but the neshama is a chelik alakam mimal. Okay, so now, let me pause. What's the word? Brace ourselves and proceed. We spent forever explaining the two different proofs for the idea of chelik alakam mimal mamish. We came away from that conversation with two ideas. Number one, the neshama is a piece of Hashem, and number two, that the neshama is being a piece of Hashem comes through Sfiras HaChochma. And now I added a third nekuda. And the third nekuda is that neshamas, which are chelik alakam mimal mamish, they come from the Eibishter because they are from the kelim side of the fence, as opposed to from the oil side of the fence. They're designed to be an entity unto itself. That is godliness. But godliness that's not just reflecting the Eibishter, but godliness that's copying the Eibishter. I don't mean imitating. It means doing what the Eibishter does. The Eibishter chooses, a Yid chooses, with the koyach of the Eibishter taken. But the Eibishter chooses, and the Yid chooses. This gets us to where we're holding. And the Alter Rebbe now is going to ask us what the Rebbe used to call a klotzkash. A klotzkash means, please don't ask that question because it's such an obvious question. Nobody's going to be able to answer it and you're going to ruin the whole fantasy. That's klotzkashas. The klotzkasha is, if it's true that every neshama is a chelik alakam mimal mamish, if it's true that every neshama comes from chokhmah, and if it's true that every neshama comes in such a way that on the one hand, it's a metzias b'fnei atzmi, it's an entity unto itself. On the other hand, it's a servant of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. How come neshamas are not the same? There are big neshamas and little neshamas, high neshamas and low neshamas, important neshamas and secondary neshamas. We all came to the same place. We all, every Yid is a chelik alakam mimal mamish, from the biggest to the smallest. Every Yid's neshama comes from Chochmei Law. And every Yid's neshama, maybe this is not mamish true, but Rubon could call them a Yidden, come in a way that they're an entity unto themselves, that they come from Keli, not from Eir. Like I mentioned, that it says in Ayim Beis, that Rashbi is Neir Avayin, which is coming from Eir, not from Keli. But the most neshamas come as a Keli, as an entity unto itself. Frag di Alter Rebbe, v'av sheyesh riveis minei chalukei madreges b'neshamas. I don't understand. I actually read something from the inside of the book. Believe it or not, it happened. Unless I get rough. Erev Tisha B'Av. Yeah, what's a Pashtakash? If every neshama is coming from mamish, and every neshama comes from Chochmei Law, and every neshama, at least the vast majority of neshamas, are a metzias b'fnei atzmi. That's a representation, which is a copy, which is another expression of the free will of atzmas and Musa and Sof Baruch Hu. Shouldn't we be all the same? And it's not the case. Va'af, and even though we all come through the same process, and we all end up in very different places. Some of us turn out to be, mitzvah from the Zogan, a Rebbe, a Yossi, and a Shoma Klolis. And some of us are, what do I say it? Schlubs. Nice guys, just don't bother them. Right? And he explains, higher and even higher, liyain kates, to a degree of disparity, to a degree of division that you can't even measure. Kemai, and he gives you examples. Example number 1. Goydel mailas nishames ha'aves u'meisha rabbeinu olav shalom. The greatness of the neshama of the Avis and the neshama of Meisha Rabbeinu al in comparison to neshamas they say nu eila the ikve Mashiach. The neshamas of our generations that are the heel of the Mashiach. And the Rebbe used to use the expression, it's such a serious expression. Ikve the Mashiach. The heel is a whole body. And the heel also has a head and eyes and a nose and a mouth. And then there's the heel within the heel. You remember the Alter Rebbe wrote this about his generation. Alter Rebbe's Chassidim were not exactly us. And he calls them Neshamas de Seinu Eile Ikva the Mashiach. So where do we fit? If the Alter Rebbe's Ikva the Mashiach, what are we? We're the stuff on the bottom of the heel that you don't want to talk about. So we're called Ikva Sadi Ikvasi. Shein bechlinas akwayim mamish, we're mamish like a heel. Legabe hameach varash, when you compare it to the brain and the head. So I don't understand, says the Alter Rebbe, if we all start off the same, and we all go through the same ishtalshalos, and because we have the same basic definition, how do we end up so disparate? How do we end up so different? And he continues, V'chein b'chol deir v'deir. I just gave you an example that's cosmic. Talk about Avraham Avinu compared to you and me. Talk about Moshe Rabbeinu compared to you and me. So you talk about the neshamas from the beginning of time to the end. By the way, bigger than the Yavis and bigger than Moshe Rabbeinu is even other Merishim. And you can ask a question if you wanted, why doesn't Alter Rebbe bring the neshama of other Merishim? And maybe there's a tenet. But one thing is for sure, you and I, we're not other Merishim. Then kleine men shalach, mit kleine neshama. And then he says, forget about the others. Talk about us, our generation alone. This is true in each generation. There are Jews that are the head of the thousands of the Jewish people. Their souls are like a head and a brain. It's compared to the souls of the Hamoin. Hamoin in English means the masses. The Amei Ha'aretz, Amei Ha'aretz means the people of the world. Pashat to mention. So b'meila hat me weiter akash. Forget about the others. Just us. Right? What do the kids say? It's not fair. You better believe it, it's not fair. It wasn't meant to be fair. You sit in school and you have a kid sitting in front of you and the guy got an IQ of 152. And you can count to 10. It's not fair. INF, it's not fair. You're right, it's not fair. The Eibusha didn't make us the same. But he also didn't make the expectations equal. Right? Lefum gam lo shichna. Was steht? Ein HaKadosh Baruch Hu bo betrunyim b'riesav. These are expressions that the Rebbe would say over and over and over and over again. The Eibush expects of each person what they could deliver, and there's big people, and there's medium people, there's little people, there's tiny people. But the Alter Rebbe's kasha is, when did this happen? I don't understand. Ich verstehe nicht. And we all are and we all are coming from Chachmei Allah. How do we come so disparate? And then he continues further. He gives a third form to the same questions. V'chein nefoshes legabe nefoshes. I just talked, says the Alter Rebbe, about the comparison between the neshama and the neshama. Neshama is a big deal. You know what kind of big deal neshama is? And again, this is the language of Tanya. And as I've told you repeatedly, the Tanya and the Maimonides Hasidus that are based on the Tanya speak in different languages. Neshama is available to big tzaddikim. We all go to the Yoyah. And we all get to the Zohar. But not all of us get through the Zohar. You see what I'm saying? My grandfather Shustim in Ova Shalom hat mir erzählt a Geschmack am Meise that they went to the Tzion of the Friedrich Rebbe the first year, Tafshin Yud, and the Rebbe went with the Rebbetzin in a car, in a taxi, as he called it. A few cars went. They used to call cars in those days taxis. Based in Tavos, maybe because no one owned their own. So a bunch of people showed up at the Eil together, and at the same time the Rebbe arrived. So the Rebbe said to the Anash, you'll approach first, you'll do your thing, and when you leave, the Rebbe and the Rebbetzin went over together. So you understand yourself that they didn't hang around the oil for very long. The Rebbe sitting in a car, waiting for them to finish. They went over, they put a picture, and they walked away. The Minor Lashon had not yet been printed. The Minor Lashon was printed by the Middle Rebbe to say that it's seen in the Alter Rebbe. So whenever there was a need, they printed Minor Lashon. The last Minor Lashon was printed in Rostov. But who's visiting Rostov? It's in Russia. So when the Rebbe Rayatz passed away, the Rebbe quickly printed a Minor Lashon. But it didn't happen in a day. It took weeks or whatever it was, maybe months. The Minor Lashon was not yet printed. So nobody knew the Minor Lashon. So the Rebbe says, "Talk about Minor Lashon." So the Rebbe says, by heart. By heart. You'll say the Tillim, I'll say the Zayar. You understand? You understand? You understand? You're talking them Tillim, and I'll say, the Rebbe didn't have a Zayar. You're talking them Tillim. The Zayar you say by the Tzion is relevant. It's not just a piece of Zayar, like a tikkun choice, you gotta have Zayar. The Zayar talks about the union of a neshama. The Zayar that Al Rebbe quotes in the Kiddush of Zayin, Tzatike de Estala, Geshtakach B'Hayam, Yatum B'Chayoy, is in that Zayar we say by the Tzion. And what it says in that Zayar is, every Yid has nefesh. Tzadikim have ruach. Big tzadikim have neshama. Now in Chassidus, you learn that every Yid has nefesh, ruach, neshama, chaya, yechida. This is a typical example, and there are many examples where the Tanya is a different language than the Maimonides Chassidus on which the Tanya is based. I told this to you before. The Tanya in many ways follows the language of the Zohar. And the Maimonides Chassidus, I think you could say is true, they follow the language of the Kisra Arizah. And maybe this question about Ne'eravai and Nishmas Adam, whether the Neshama is the light or the Neshama is the Keli, is also connected to this. But the Tanya very frequently follows the way the Zayar is written, even though the Maimonides Chassidus don't follow the same language, and you have to keep track of this. So every Yid knows he has a Nefesh, Ruach, Neshama, Chaya, Yechidah, but not in Tanya. In Tanya you have Nefesh. If you're a Tzaddik, you have Ruach. A Tzaddik, you have Ruach. Ksachakol. If you're a big Tzaddik, you have Neshama. So the Alter Rebbe said, I don't understand. Neshamas all go through the same process. They come through Chokhmah. How do they end up different? First of all, he compares us to the Avos and Moshe Rabbeinu. Then he compares us to the Rashi Alpha Yisrael of our own generation. And he concludes, V'chei nefashos agabe nefashos. Not only is there a huge difference between one neshama and another neshama in the language of the Zayar. Neshama is the highest madrega of the neshama, which is big tzaddikim. There are big neshamas and little neshamas. Every one of us has a nefesh. The smallest yid has a nefesh. And there's different nefeshes too. The nefesh of a tzaddik. Not only is a tzaddik different than a pashat yid because he also has ruach, he also has neshama, he has a different nefesh. You can't compare one nefesh to the other nefesh. Ki kol nefesh klula. Every Yiddish neshama consists of nefesh, ruach, neshama, of all three madregas, nefesh, ruach, neshama. And the disparity, the idea that even though we all go through the same ishtalshalos, and we all are in essence the same thing, nevertheless we're so different, is true not only on the madregas of neshamas, which are holier, and not only the madrega of ruach, but even on the madrega of nefesh. This is the Alter Rebbe's kash. I don't understand, if we all started off the same, how did we end up so different? Remember being in nursery and kindergarten? In kindergarten everybody was the same. And then some people come out to be Rosh Yeshivas and Gedei Yisrael, and some people come out to be Fine Balabati. Okay, you start out the same. How did we end up so different? Right? So Bagashmis, you can blame it on psychology, you can blame it on social circumstances, this, that, and the other. But you're talking about the shamas. If we all started out the same, how did we end up so different? This is the teretz, the kasha. Okay? And the teretz we'll do next time in Mr.